today I wanted to talk about effort, in particular right effort. Samma vayamo. In particular, why it's so useful in the Noble Eightfold Path. How it really brings everything together. So the four right efforts are abandoning, discarding, getting rid of arisen, unwholesome states. The second one is to make sure that those same evil, unwholesome states do not arise again. And then we make the effort to cultivate, to bring about wholesome states. And then the last effort is to make sure that those very same wholesome states that have arisen, that they last, that they persist and do not disappear. So how do we practice this? Well, the first effort is quite obvious, I would imagine. And it requires mindfulness, sati. It requires clear comprehension. And it really requires that we see the danger in unwholesome states, that we feel the urgency to get rid of them in the first place. And so we'd have to watch our bodies, our feelings, our mind, and be aware of the Dhammas, being aware of the Four Noble Truths in particular. We see that anger arises in the mind, or jealousy, being envious of another person's property, being lustful or seeking desire in one object or another. We need to catch these states as they arise. And simply being aware that they're there, or we're able to release and let go. Make an effort to abandon these states. And once we've abandoned these states, then even more mindfulness is needed. This time it's not really being aware that the state has already arisen. It's being aware of the conditions that might bring about that state again. If you know you like fancy cars and Mercedes-Benz and whatever it may be, then you should know that when I go to a car show, or when I'm out on the street, to be prepared to bring your mindfulness with you, or simply make an effort to not look at cars. And this one is not so easy. It's already easy to see when there's a problem that has arisen, but how do we stop it from coming up in the first place? And this, of course, comes along with practice and dedication. The next effort is to make wholesome states arise. And so looking at the unwholesome courses of action, thoughts of killing, or intending to renounce, not intending ill will, being harmless, cultivating these intentions. The Buddha doesn't say to cultivate metta in these particular cases. He just points out that we shouldn't cultivate states of ill will, states of harmlessness. And so by simply stopping these states, or putting a blocker on thinking about harming another person or being cruel to another person, this is already quite wholesome. But the next step would be, how can I cultivate metta and a sense of friendliness and kindness towards people? How can I cultivate compassion towards people? By body, it means not killing, not stealing, having no sexual misconduct. And by speech, it means not to lie, not having malicious speech or harsh speech, speech that puts another person down. We're not having divisive speech, gossiping and separating amongst one another. And the last speech is idle chatter. And monks even can fall into this quite often, that we'll talk about anything and everything under the sun, except for what is useful for ourselves, whether that be Vinaya or simply how we can better ourselves, skills that we might want to learn, or maybe even how to make progress in our own life goals. So not to get bogged down in speech that really leads us nowhere. So we talked about cultivating metta, cultivating compassion, renunciation, which might not be so easy for those of you living in the world, but there is already an act of renunciation when giving dana and being generous with your personal belongings, that you're able to relinquish your own items for the benefit of another person. This is already an act of renunciation. Refraining from killing living beings, refraining from stealing. These are all ways that we will cultivate wholesome states, cultivating a sense of blamelessness, harmlessness, and non-ill will. And these actions that we don't do, but also what we engage in, and also what we say to people, and how we think, this will begin to mold and shape the mind. Molds and shapes the mind in a way that leads to higher forms of existence, and ultimately towards Nibbana. And this is where the last step comes in, that we are able to not only cultivate and initiate many of these forms of behavior, but we're able to maintain them for 1 day, 2 days, a week, months, for the rest of our life. And I find it quite interesting how advanced humans have become with building cars, computers, skyscrapers. We can put people on the moon, but what we have so much trouble with is changing our behavior, changing the way we think, changing our habits. And this is what we as Buddhists undertake. Those of us who follow the Buddha's teachings, we really take on some of the most difficult things that a human being could do. And this is another way we can cultivate wholesome states of mind. Simply reflecting on our behavior, our thoughts, and our speech, and delighting in the wholesomeness. So I offer that for your reflection today.